this PreSeed Academy ToolTalk. I am Louise and the program manager and also the host and facilitator for today's ToolTalk. So today's a little bit different because usually we do startup talks, which are usually 1 hour and cover a more loose talk about a topic that we find relevant. So this ToolTalk will be a little bit longer. It will be 1.5 hours where we will dig into a specific tool. In this case, the ESG Napkin that we have just that we're introducing for the first time. But we've also done some other tool talks in the past, mostly regarding marketing and sales with marketing automation and stuff like that. But the tool talk concept is really that we really narrow in on one specific tool and really nerd through that tool. So I'm very excited to host our third tool talk today on this important topic. So I just saw that we have about 50 new faces here today, and for those of you who have not been to PreSeed Academy before, I just want to do like a 2-minute intro to who we are, because I think it's really important to understand that we are not a traditional startup school. We are not an academic program where you will go through a program and then in the end you will get some kind of diploma. I think we're kind of the opposite of that. So we are built on the foundation of all the founders that we have been investing in over time. And we are curated by PreSeed Ventures so that we are trying to establish like a learning space with a high quality content, but with the knowledge from people who have been there in your situation already. So, and of course the idea is still to accelerate your ideas into your startups, right? But I think we can provide a little bit more than an academic perspective on this. So that is like the essence of the academy, our academy. So I guess you can say that our foundation is our founders. We have about 400 of them, and they are meeting with us during these startup talks and tool talks to educate you and inspire you to how you can work around certain problems, right? And I think that's what makes this academy so great, that it takes a little bit different and more hands-on approach. So we've been doing this for about 2.5 years now, and we've been covering quite a few subjects now. We've kind of done this framework that we call the roadmap, where we have mapped it out on 7 different topics. And as you can see, we have done a lot of talks and content already on the different subjects. I just want to tell you that all this content is still available, and you can look at it on our website. You can find a lot of more knowledge, both the recordings from the previous startup talks. You can see the digest and articles and tools and all this great stuff. So if there's still like topics that you think, okay, I really need to know more about how to validate my business idea, then go ahead and go into our website and explore that metro line a little bit. So today is also a little bit exciting because I needed to add a new metro line today. And I don't know if I'm going to call it impact or ESG yet, but I just threw it in there because this doesn't really fit anywhere else we have done. And this is really cool that we are also, as an academy, you know, growing and evolving around really important issues and topics. So today we're doing the first session on ESG and impact together with Alexander and Chris. And it really comes from, you know, our own journey as investors and having to focus more on who are we investing in and how are we helping our founders reach those goals to make a better world, right? So last week we were hosting an event, which was a panel debate between different investors who were talking a little about our role as investors and what we can do to help make a positive impact. So of course, you know, and one of the main points in this, if you watch the full, you can watch the full recording as well as on our website. But of course, one of the main thing is that we can invest in green startups, right? But we can also help them through our academy, for example, and educate and try to make, you know, a better understanding of what can you actually do as a founder, even though you don't have a green startup. Maybe you work on something else. So how can you, as a tech founder, be more sustainable. You can make a better impact, but not necessarily have a physical product or have the green aspect as your core business. So that's also what we're going to cover a little bit about today. And Alexander, my colleague, investment director, he will be introducing you to this topic, to ESG as a concept, and understanding the basics of ESG. What is it, and what should we understand from a tech startup perspective? How is it relevant for us? And he has actually been one of the head of development on this ESG napkin, so he will also walk us through the napkin itself and take us through the specific areas depending on where you are in your startup road, right? So very excited to cover that in detail as well. Then at 1:40, we will say hi to Chris, who is actually CFO in a less traditional way as Chief Footprint Officer at Neue. And he will tell us a little bit more about how they do it in Neue and what their experiences are with ESG. Then we have actually a live Q&A, but this time we'll do it a little bit longer than we usually do. Normally we only have 15 minutes allocated for Q&A. We've made it a little bit longer today, so make sure you send in relevant questions along as we go, but you can also do it in the end. It's just very important that you ask the questions in the Q&A tab and not in the chat section, because we'll pick it up in the Q&A section. And also, if there are some questions that you really like, then give them a vote, because that way I know which ones to prioritize when we get to the Q&A. If you sit back after this and think, wow, I would really need some more help on this, or there's something unanswered here, you can join us for an open door session. Our next one is May 5th, and you need to apply at least a week before that, so we can cover all the applications. But if you don't know about our open door sessions, it's a free offer for a 30-minute talk with one of our investment managers. And you can really talk about any subject, any challenge of yours in your startup. And it's just a forum, a one-to-one, a private forum where you can get some valuable feedback. So go ahead and apply for that if you feel the need for that. So now I think I will hand over the talk to Alexander, who will introduce you to what we all came for today, our ESG topic and napkin.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Just find the presentation. And then I will. Okay, I hope this works out there. Super. So yeah, thank you, Lisa. As Louisa said, my name is Alexander, and I am super excited to be here today. But before we actually do dive into my presentation, I would like to start at a bit of a different place. 6 months ago, my wife and I had our first child. And this morning when I was up taking care of him, way too early, of course, he doesn't sleep well these days, I was thinking about this presentation and all the founders out there listening in, right? And then suddenly it dawned on me, one of you guys might just right now be starting the company that he will be working in 20 years time, right? And then I thought, oh, I really hope they make it a nice company, you know, so he'll be happy going to work and actually thrive as a human being. But the thing is, I actually believe that we all would like to build nice companies, right? We would all also like, of course, to build super fast growing and scalable companies that become worth $1 billion. But at the same time, we would believe everybody would like to build a good company, right? And the thing is, I do not believe that purpose and profit can't go hand in hand, that they rule out each other, right? So this is what I want to dive into today a bit, to talk about how you, all the way from the founding days of your startup journey, can work with the ESG factors in order to build nice companies. All right, briefly about my background. So I'm actually from DTU. I have technical background from DTU. Then I spent 5 years in management consulting, where I actually also led the firm's ESG initiatives. Then for the last 5.5 years, I've been with PreSeed Ventures. And during that time, I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of cool startups. Some of them are listed here, and that's including Superb and Seaborg, Proper, and Boom. You'll hear from a few of them today. This is the agenda I had planned for today. First of all, I'm gonna spend a few minutes on the ESG factors. What are they? What do they encompass? And then a few minutes on why we believe it's important. but then I'll spend the majority of time on our ESG napkin, right? So that's an MVP launch of something that the world hasn't seen before. So I'm super excited about that. And then in the end, I'm going to spend a few minutes on how I think you could get started with the napkin. So just to make it 100% clear, I'll not use a lot of time and a lot of pretty words on why ESGs are important. I'll spend the majority of time actually diving into how you could get started with this in your companies out there. Okay, cool. Let's dive into it. So ESG, of course, stands for environmental, social, and governance, right? ESG, it's an array of frameworks that all aim to apply non-financial factors to doing a business analysis of identifying opportunities and risks in a given company. So in essence, it's a long list of factors within the 3 areas that talk about what impact a company will have on the world that is non-financial. Diving into the different 3 areas, environmental has a lot to do with the conservation of the natural world, right? So that is your company's take on climate change, carbon emission, waste generation, energy use, and all the likes. An example here of something that went really wrong lately is the Volkswagen emission scandal, right? Dieselgate, as is also called. Here, Volkswagen lied to the public about the NOx emissions level from their diesel cars, actually by a factor 40 or so quite a lot. And it went completely wrong. As the news came out, Volkswagen's share price actually dropped by 1/3, which is insane for a listed company like that. And in pure fines and penalties, the scandal has ended up costing Volkswagen more than $33 billion, right? And on top of that, you should add all the bad publicity and everything else. So bad case, good case in the environmental factors, that would be Tesla, right? Who founded a company just to try to accelerate the world's transition to renewable energy. So there's a bad case and then there's a good case. They're building on top of the ESG agenda in order to build a more valuable company. The social factors, that's all about people and relationship. So it's about diversity, inequality, employee well-being, human rights, consumer protection, and all the likes. Here, an example that has gone wrong lately is actually in the chocolate industry. So chocolate is mostly made from cacao beans, and most cacao beans is produced in Africa. And sadly, there's a lot of child labor being used in cacao production. And multiple studies actually found that a lot of the larger companies producing chocolate, such as Nestlé and Mars, they're actually buying cacao beans from these farmers that use child labor, right? So that was a lot of bad publicity to the big corporates in the chocolate industry. And then again, there is somebody utilizing the ESG agenda and building a good company while making the world a better place in this chocolate industry as well. And that's Alter Ego. There's actually a few of them, but one of them is Alter Ego. They aim to do a full circle approach to both eating, farming, and doing business in the chocolate industry, right? So the idea is they do not source beans from farms that use child labor, and their main mission is to sell as much chocolate as possible, because that way they know that the more chocolate they sell, the less chocolate out there is being eaten that has been produced by child laborers. Kind of a nice mission. So the last one, governance, that's all about your standards for running a company and the legal stuff around it, right? So it's a lot on shareholder rights, tax strategy, accounting standards, audits, etc. And a famous example of things that have gone wrong here, and I guess you can all guess what I'm getting at, is of course WeWork, right? So right before they were doing the IPO, they actually were planning to do the IPO. The market started having concerns about the governance structure at WeWork, about the too much power being centered around the CEO, wrong incentives in the company, and a lot of other things. The long story short, WeWork actually had to withdraw the IPO filing in September 2019. The CEO had to resign and give up the majority of his voting rights. Also, the valuation of the company went from $47 billion to $10 billion, right? And $10 billion being less than they actually raised altogether since they started. So a lot of money being lost there. And then again, a company who has a different take on this, right? It's actually a Danish company, Arla. So Arla is actually a cooperative business where Arla's large production facilities are actually owned by the farmers themselves out there and run in a much more democratic way. So compared to all power being centered at WeWork, this is a lot more distributed take on ownership. Cool. That was a quick run through of the 3 ESG areas and some of the factors within these, right? And then a few words on why we actually think this is important. So first, I think we should all ask ourselves, why are we building companies? Are we trying, and why are we trying to build, bring something new into the world? Is it only for the money or the fame or the thrill? Or do you actually want to change something for the better, right? Do you have a higher mission with what you're aiming to build? We at PSV and PreSeed Academy, we actually believe that we have a responsibility, all of us, to leave the earth a better place than we found it. We call this human first. So besides human first and the moral imperative we think it is of putting humans before profit, there's actually been multiple studies showing a positive correlation between ESG, focusing on ESG factors, and the long-term success of companies. One example here is FCLT Global, that they're showing that there is the greater board diversity you have is one of the stronger indicators of long-term success for a public company. And on the opposite side, having ESG controversies is one of the main indicators of having poor long-term performance. Actually, this is a very studied field, and there's been even a lot of meta-studies on the fields. So meta-studies is studies of studies. And this last study, it included more than 1,100 studies on the links between ESG and positive outcomes for a company and investors. It found that 58% of them found a positive correlation, 13% found no correlation, and only 8% found a negative correlation. So all in general, all data points towards doing good is also doing good business. Much of this research, though, is only based on large corporates and public companies, right? There's a lot less research being done at the early stage tech startups. But I think the same argument, and we think the same argument holds true, right? That both consumers and corporates are increasingly looking into ESG focus when they're doing making their buying decisions. We believe that public policies are only going in one direction. Also, we have experienced from our own startups that recruiting and retaining talent is a lot easier if you are focused on ESGs in your company. And in the end, not least, investors at all levels increasing their focus on ESG factors. All right, so moving on. The PSV's ESG Napkin and MVP launch. This is the first time I've shown it to the world, and so I'm almost a little nervous. Bear with us, right? So before we actually do dive into it, though, a bit on our ambition, the ingredients in the napkin, and that is an MVP. So our ambition with this napkin is to help early stage tech companies get a grasp on how they could actually be working with ESG factors in order to build their companies better from the beginning. The napkin is created on the basis of multiple interviews, both with a lot of our founders and experts in the field. It's based on literature and reviews, of course. And lately, I've actually also just got involved with an initiative that has the exact same name as we've been doing from the start. It's called the ESG Initiative for VCs. Sorry, the ESG for VC initiatives. It's an initiative that's started by PreSeed Ventures and PreSeed Ventures, and it's definitely something to follow if you are into this field. In the end, it is an MVP, so it's a first take. This is our place to start, and it's meant as inspiration. It's also a work in progress, so please do come out, reach out with comments or inputs or anything else you might have on towards the napkin. All right. The napkin is divided up into 4 main areas. 4 areas that all startups should and are working with continuously all the time, right? So that being the team that is building your startup, is the product and service that you're trying to build. It is the customer or market that you're serving. And then there's the financial and legal setup around the company. Then it's divided into 3 different stages. And these stages are very early stage, but this is also where we work and have our most insights, right? So first stage is an MVP and founder team formation. It's right in the early days where you are a couple of friends coming together, brainstorming ideas, and maybe even pivoting all the time to find a suitable business model. Then moving on to the pre-seed stage, that's where you have your first couple of customers and also doing a first couple of hires. Then moving on to the seed stage, right? That's where you have a strong C-level team in place. You have a product that is, loved by many users or many customers. We then, for each of these kind of like main areas, on the basis of the interviews with our portfolio companies, we defined 10 themes that both them and we think are the most important to be working with in the early stages of a tech company towards the ESG factors, right? These are the 10 themes. So it's human capital, it's diversity and inclusiveness, and it's building a great place to work within the team section. Then on the product, it's responsible product development, and it's the footprint of your product in the long run. Towards the customers and market, it's the societal ambition that you have with your startup. It's the business model and how you grow this. It's the data ethics and GDPR and privacy, everything around that. And then towards the financial legal setup, the company structure and governance, and of course the investors that you choose to work with and their take on the ESG factors, right? So the idea behind these different maturity levels is that, of course, you at different levels will have different resources available to your startup, right? So this could speak for actually waiting a bit with starting with the whole ESG agenda thing. But what we also found during interviews is that trying to fix an ESG structure that is wrong from the beginning actually becomes increasingly more difficult the later stage you get, right? So it's a bit like technical debt. If you're building on top of crap code, it's very difficult to change at a later stage. So you should start out right from the beginning. That's why we think that it's we recommend that it's very important to start quite early actually, to build the right foundation, but to do it small and then build as you get more resources in your company and therefore can have a fuller grasp. Okay, so without further ado, here is the PSV ESG napkin. And I've been talking fast. Sorry, I tend to do this. I will try to slow down out there. I hope you got everything I said up to now. All right, so for each of the 10 themes that we figured out was important, we also defined a couple of key areas or KPIs that you could be looking into at the different levels of your maternity, right? So these are, in our view, the most important areas and KPIs to focus on the different stages. For human capital, that could be, for example, in the beginning, founders' mental health is super important to have on the agenda, right? And then moving up, as soon as you start doing your first couple of hires, it's very important to actually see, what are the employee work-life balance, because a lot of startups tend to work quite a lot. What are the kind of like employment laws and compensation that you're offering your first hires. And also at some point during the pre-seed stage, you should start working on an employee handbook that actually defines, how do you work at your company and how do you, do these things. Then moving into the seed stage, then by then you should probably have a basic HR function in place. You should be working with the actual job quality of the startup or the jobs that you're offering, and also maybe create clear development paths for the people that you employ. A big one that always comes up around seed stage is also paternity, maternity leave options, which is always difficult because you're always stretched with resources, and the speeds may make it difficult to do a substitute, right? But there's definitely something to be said about that as well. Today, I won't have time to dive into all of these areas. That will take too long. Instead, I will bring forward a couple of them, and then the rest will be further explored in a series of blog posts over the next couple of weeks from our side. So diving into it. One of the factors that we think of is of the uttermost important is a company's societal ambition, right? So when you're a new founder team in the early days and you sit and have a discussion, about the impact you would have if and when successful with your company. So we think that you should sit down and think about where your company will be in 10 years, and then what kind of impact will a company like that you imagine have on the world. Here we think an inspirational KPI could be to at least not make the world a worse place. So that you accumulate an impact on the world, on the ESG factors, is at least positive. Hopefully, we believe that you should tie your societal ambition to the mission statement and trying to create a better world for all of us out there. So an inspirational startup story to talk a bit about the area and how we see it done well. And that's with Vertical AI. It's a company I've been working with. They build AI software for windmills to run more efficiently. The idea is that their success is actually tied to a positive change in the world, right? The more software they sell and the faster they scale, the faster the transition to renewable energy will happen, because they make it more efficient and cheaper than. So their societal ambition and the impact when successful is tied to the long-term journey of the growth, right? So we think it's an important point all the way in the early days to sit down and have a discussion in the founder team regarding this area. Another one you could focus on is founders' mental health. So starting a company for founders is incredibly hard work. We know this. And it's actually also often very lonely work. And it's a known fact that founders have a higher rate of depression and higher risk of stress than the rest of society. And there's a certain quote around this that I really like. It goes, starting a company is like a man riding a lion, right? People from the outside, they think, wow, this guy is brave. But the guy sitting on top of the lion, he's thinking, how the fuck did I get up on a lion? And how do I keep from getting eaten, right? So it's difficult, and it's a lot of stressful work running a company. And I said, fuck, sorry, I shouldn't do that on open air. Yeah, I will hear for that later. Anyway, moving on, inspirational KPIs in this area is that we really think that you should put it on the agenda to actually have an open discussion within the founder team on how you are thriving with the mental health, right? To put it on the agenda for your founder meetings. We urge everybody to have external founder-to-founder sharing. So find somebody, you know, who's in a similar situation and talk about the difficult stuff that you're actually going through in building your company. And when you're moving up in the stages, maybe even consider having a professional coach for a session, right? So to explore this area. Inspirational startup story, it's not really a startup story, but it's an area that we, this founders mental health, that we dive a lot into, and we think it's super important. We've just seen it go wrong too many times in the early days with our portfolio companies. So we actually started something that we call founder circles. It's where we match founders from different portfolio companies together in groups where they then share. And then we have a mentor and a coach affiliated. And then there's a circle where they share all the difficulties they're having with building their startup, right, on a mental level. Moving on, right? So now you're moving up towards the pre-seed stage. You're hopefully doing the first couple of hires, right? Then we think that recruiting for diversity is super important, right? So actually on the female side, there's growing evidence that there's a positive correlation between the company's financial projections and then having women in senior positions. And still only around 5% of VC-funded firms actually have women in their executive teams. That's an insane fact and something that needs to change. So here, inspirational KPIs we believe and potential aspirations could be to, of course, ensure that you have an unbiased recruitment process. And then maybe as a KPI, you should state for yourself that when you're doing job interviews, you at least hire or talk to one person from an underrepresented group, right? And the same on kind of creating your board and advisory board. Talk to at least one person from an underrepresented group just to ensure to see if they might be a match, right? A great tool to help you with this actually is a Danish startup that developed a tool. It's called Develop Diverse. They help you with your writing, so you ensure that you are writing in an inclusive way. So for example, when you're writing a job description, that you speak to everybody and not only a copy of yourself. Moving on, right? So here Chris is going to share a lot more on this, but we also would like to, footprint from your product. So in the early days, footprint at scale, and then moving on a bit, maybe calculating footprint of your tech stack, right? We believe that it's super important that you start with these thoughts all the way in the beginning. Are you building a business model? Are you building a product that will have a heavy footprint on the world? And how could you minimize this going forward? And then as you mature, we think it's a lot important that you put a bit of numbers behind it and start calculating what your actual footprint is. I brought up Neue here because I know that Chris will be sharing their story on this and how they work with this. So I won't dive into it more here. Managing failure. Yeah, it might not be the most cheerful one of these areas to go over. but it's a fact that many startup companies will ultimately fail, and that we should wind up responsibly. So here we believe that some inspirational KPIs could be, of course, avoid bankruptcy if possible, but that means that fire sales or acqui-hires and all these other possibilities, it might be a better road. Then be honest all the way through and follow the national rules. Be timely with your decisions. There's certain timeframes that you need to obtain. Use proper and transparent communication all the way through. And then we really believe you should support your employees. They just lost their job and they need your help also in the firm to go forward. Maybe a startup war story that is worth sharing here is a company that I worked with and was on the board for. It's called Relink. Relink was building very cool software for the HR space, and I served on the board. It was going well until it didn't, of course. And in the end, business was really getting bad, right? And we knew there was a chance that we'd go into bankruptcy. So we started the whole process. We warned all investors. We had a talk to all of them, had a dialogue with them. We did the same with all employees. But Relink actually had something, or the CEO of Relink actually practiced something that he called radical transparency. So he was full transparent with everybody who was employed about how the company was performing. So he actually shared all board presentations with the full team. It's something I haven't seen in other places, but I really like this idea of full transparency, right? Radical transparency. Anyway, it also meant that in the process of nearing the cliff, the team was fully informed, and actually they chose to stay on and then to give the company a full chance, fighting chance, and then to see if we could make it. It didn't happen, and finally we sadly had to close down. But I actually thought it was a good process if there could be such a thing, because everybody was fully informed and everybody was aware of the risk and how and why we proceeded as we did. Right, so managing failure is of the most importance as well in building a sustainable business. Right, it's not sustainable, but building a good business. Another one, right? So data ethics, privacy, GDPR, marketing, and consent management, all these things, right? And we think it's super important that you sit down from the beginning, have a talk about how you would like to treat this as a company. What are your ethics? Where are your limits? And then going up, that you define GDPR steps, right? There are a lot of tools for this, but also you need to have identified the processes within your company. And towards marketing and consent management, right? We believe that it's best to collect as little data as possible. Only collect the data, of course, by lawful means. Do not disclose any information, and directly communicate to consumers if you're changing everything else, right? Maybe a startup war story here could be that we have actually from a company in our portfolio that is still alive, so I can't say which, but we actually saw a Series A round fell through in the last phases of the investors' due diligence due to missing consent on users. It's insane, right? So it's not actually insane because it was a corporate investment firm, and they were super sensitive to this area. But having your A round fall through that late in the process is very bad. So it's just to say it's not only the market and the regulators that are focusing on the GDPR and data ethics. It's also all the investors out there, right? Moving on, I would also like to speak a bit about the paternity and maternity leave options. It's always super difficult, and normally hits around end pre-seed stage, normal seed stage, that there is somebody who has to leave due to children, of course. And the idea is that it's a happy thing, but it's always key. All in the early days, right? All resources are key resources, and the speed of your company just makes it super difficult to replace them for a while and then having them come back in, right? But still, though, we believe that we as companies have a responsibility, and we should live up to at least to national market standards, right? An inspirational story here could be Seaborg that I've been serving on the board for. Seaborg is trying to build clean and safe nuclear power. So they're building new reactors. They do this with thorium and molten salt, so different technologies than are used in normal nuclear reactors out there today. Anyway, that doesn't matter. But Seaborg, they are working with what they call gender gender blind leave options, right? So they actually match in the Danish law. The women have more options than their father, right? And Seaborg actually matches this for the fathers as well. So it's a gender blind leave options for everybody. Seaborg is in general a bit radical out there, right? And it's not because I want to dive into it, but they also towards the equal opportunities, they actually work with equal pay for everybody in the full team. So everybody gets the same salary. The CEO makes exactly the same amount of money as the office manager does. But as towards the CEO of the Seaborg says, there's no point in trying to save the world if you're not making it a better place along the way. Cool. That was a quick run through of the ESG Napkin and a few words on a selected few of them. As again, we will be rolling these out over a series of blog posts and diving into the full napkin as such. And then here, I would love to spend a few words on how you can actually get started with the ESG focus in the early stages of developing a startup. Right? So we believe that the most important thing is actually to just get started. So maybe have a look through the napkin with your own business in mind. Have an idea of where can you make the largest impact by doing the least. So saying an e-health startup dealing with health data, right? Their data privacy might be of super high importance. And if you're a fintech company handling other people's money, then governance, is maybe of super high importance. Then choose a few and set some ambition for these all the way in the early days, right? Because then it'll be easier to grow when your company is growing going forward. Last point being is that there is always in these cases both a risk and opportunity side, right? There's always two sides. So it makes a lot of sense to focus on the risk and mitigation side. But we would urge you to also actually have a look at the business opportunity side of things. So how can you actually use the ESG agenda and the stuff that you do to create a nicer world while building a valuable startup, right? That was it for me, and I've been very fast, I can see in time, so sorry if it went too fast, but yeah, I'm looking forward to your questions out there, and hope you got something for it.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And I'm happy that you made it in time, but it wasn't, I didn't feel it was too rushed, so I think it will be fine. So Chris, cool. I think it's your time now.
Yes. Can you see my screen now? Yes, it's all good. Perfect. Let's see if it comes here. All right. Thank you, Alexander, and a very good introduction to how you can be working, getting started working with ESG. I'll give a short introduction to Neue, who we are, and how we're approaching working with impact and ESG. I'll also walk through the why, how, and in the end the what can you get out of working with ESG. But firstly, short introduction to Neue. We are a tech company that have created a new era of better skincare products and services. I think a lot of people who already know us see us as a skincare brand. We're also that, but first and foremost, we're a tech company that has decided to really challenge this industry and help the many people out there. So our two top missions is to increase the quality of life for people with skin concerns and to make the world's best customized products for each and every single user. We're also on a mission to change the industry. We've set a quite ambitious goal of becoming CO2 negative here in 2021, which we're working hard on these days. And then on the long run, like a long-term mission, is to become 100% circular in everything that we do. We're actively supporting 6 of the SDGs, as you can see here on the right. And then we have anchored it in our management by introducing a new type of CFO, a Chief Footprint Officer. So to sum it up in our vision statement here, we are in business to improve the quality of life for people with skin concerns by creating the world's best customized skincare products and causing no unnecessary harm to our environment. So we have a very strong focus, as you can see here, on the people side and the planet side of things. two important parts also of the ESG, and I want to just dive a little bit more into this. This is the market that we're looking into, a huge one. We've estimated that 1.5 billion people in the world are struggling with skin concerns of different kinds. You can see the numbers over here to the right. So there's a huge issue, huge concerns here that we're looking into and trying to solve. Next, by being in this industry for quite a few years now, we've seen that there's something completely wrong, and we need, together with the industry, not only us but also other companies and brands in this industry, need to take responsibility. Overall, globally, 120 billion units of packaging is created every single year by the cosmetics industry. And a lot of this is not recyclable. And if you look at all the plastics that have been put into this world, not only in our industry, but globally, 91% of it has not been recycled yet. So there's huge opportunities. Here, we as an industry and us as a brand need to take responsibility. When that being said, we're not claiming that we're a sustainable company, because there are so many of these issues that we haven't solved yet. And until we have, we cannot claim that we're a sustainable company. It's just very important for me to state we're working with sustainability, but we're not yet a sustainable company. I argue that we're a responsible company because we're taking action to solve this. We're not yet sustainable. Which brings me on to the ESG and why it's important for companies like us, but also all of you sitting out here listening to be working with ESG. First of all, why should you even bother? Alexander also showed you a little bit about why it's good business. Well, studies show that companies that are working on ESG concerns and matters are performing better than companies that aren't. So in itself, this is a pretty good reason to get started working with ESG. Secondly, we're also seeing the world's largest investors are transitioning towards sustainable investments. In this case here, the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock, went out last year and made public that they want to transition all of their assets towards sustainable investments. So this is a huge movement where you might think as a small startup, well, why is this interesting for me when the world's largest investors are moving? Well, it's important because when they start to move, it creates a ripple effect in the investment community, and other investors are following suit. Here I pasted in an example. It's an ESG questionnaire sent and shared by one of our investors, where they're asking all their portfolio companies into these questions. These are all ESG related questions. It's just for you to get a picture of what kind of questions are investors actually asking. And they're starting to ask these things and measure how their portfolio companies are performing in terms of ESG. You get the slides afterwards so you can see all the questions that investors are asking for. Here I've copy pasted a graph. It's called the product life cycle curve, and some of you might be familiar with it. The 4 stages of a product life cycle. And when making this presentation, I was kind of like, can we see a similar pattern in terms of sustainability life cycle? And I think we kind of can. The definition of sustainability was coined in 1987. Which was then followed by a decade where governments and companies were trying to figure out how to really work with these matters and tackle it. The Millennium Development Goals were launched in 2000, and they were replaced 15 years later in 2015 by the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is where we are on the curve. We're seeing an upwards trend. We've seen it the past couple of years where it's really started to take off. But I think that there's still, growth ahead or more focus to be put on this in the future. We're only in the growth phase here because we have globally some quite ambitious goals, especially on the environmental side. In 2030, we need to cut emissions by half. And globally, we have a goal of being set reach net zero emissions by 2050. So some quite ambitious goals that we're looking ahead. So obviously more needs to be done. and we can only hope that the global temperatures will also follow this curve nicely. I also did a simple Google Trends look up here. I looked up ESG investing, and we can see right around 2015, where the Sustainable Development Goals were launched, is also where the term ESG investing really started to take off. So we're definitely seeing this trending. Lastly, why is it important? Well, I think we all have a responsibility. Investors have responsibility. Working in a startup, being a startup founder, we all have a responsibility to take action. Next up, how to get started. I also just want to touch a little bit upon this. I think the ESG napkin is a great place to start, and I hope that you'll be using that. I want to tell just a little bit about how we started in Neue. It started on a whiteboard, basically, and you might see a small similarity with the ESG napkin, because this was a session together with the Anders Kjær from PreSeed Ventures, where we started looking at Neue and how we could be working with ESG. So this is basically where it started for us on a whiteboard. But I want to just take it one step back. Is when you start to form your business. This is where it really begins. So it starts with your purpose, and I'll argue that you need to find a purpose that's higher than simply making profits. You need to take account for the people and the planet as well. So starting with your purpose is the place to start. And I just brought an example here of a company that you all know, which is to show that you don't have to be necessarily a green company in order to be having a strong focus, or a strong purpose. Here's Microsoft that has a strong people focus, empowering every person is their vision. So this is a tech company that shows a very strong purpose as well towards the people side. And you might remember this that I showed you just a few minutes ago. This is our vision statement, where we have an element of the people side. This is our strongest vision is to help people with skin concerns, improving their life. And we also brought in an element of the environmental and the planet side, because we are seeing in this industry that we need to take action. And then you might say that this is easy for me to say, because I'm a founder of a direct to consumer goods company, and we have creating something physical in this world that of course we need to take action for. But what if you're in a software and a tech company where sustainability is not so obvious and might seem not so important for you? Well, I'll say that overall you're wrong, because no matter what industry, what kind of company you're building, there is an element of ESG that you should and need to be focusing on. And I've brought here a few scare cases, so to say, to large tech companies, Facebook and Uber, who have both experienced their scandals, that if they had had a stronger focus on ESG, especially the social side, perhaps could have been avoided. Facebook has had a huge scandal around data privacy, something that is important for all tech companies these days. And Uber internally scandals around discrimination and sexual harassment. I brought another example here, more recently, the Danish online supermarket Nemlig.com, who's experiencing some turbulence these days due to their working conditions for the drivers being criticized heavily. We'll see how they're going to handle a crisis like this. Next up, in how to get started is to make a materiality assessment, is to really see within your industry, within your company, what is most important for you to be working on and starting tackling in terms of ESG. And I've copied in a model here of 7 phases that you can that you can work through. But basically, it's about saying what is the most important that we should be working on with the least effort. Alexander also touched upon this. You cannot do everything at once, so you need to find a place to start, and want to start where you can make the biggest impact with the lowest effort. Another link here, a website that we found very useful at Neue when we got started. This is a website where they are categorizing different industries, and they're sort of pinpointing areas that could be most important for your company and your industry. So this is also a good place to get started, together, of course, with the ESG napkin provided by Alexander and PreSeed Ventures. Lastly, what is the outcome of working with ESG? What can you expect to get out of this? First of all, ESG is not an end station. It's more like a starting point, and it's a journey. It's something that will never end. There will always be things that you need to be focusing on, implementing, or maintaining. Here's an example of how we have tackled ESG. We divided it into environmental, social, and governance. And again, you might see some similarities with the ESG napkin, because we also divided it into 6 areas of the business that were most crucial and important to us. Is the team, the product, communication and marketing, our users, suppliers, and our distribution. And then we started setting focus on different elements within these areas and setting KPIs for where we want to be in the future. Next up, we also looked at, okay, where is it most important for us to get started? We cannot do it all at once. So we divided into 2 groups, which is somewhat similar to what Alexander showed about the risk and the opportunity. You could say that the foundation is the risk side and the opportunity side is the growth side, the value drivers for your company. If we look at the foundation side, like the ESG concerns or risks for us, we pinpointed 3 areas, namely customer privacy and data security. We are handling health data, so this is of utmost importance to us to have this in order. If we didn't have these things in order, it would really challenge the foundation for Neue. Next up, the product quality and product safety. Again, if the product safety would be compromised, this would really challenge our foundation. And then the last point here, gender diversity. When we're talking about diversity, it's way more broad than simply gender diversity. But in our case, it's the gender diversity has been a specific topic. We're 2 male founders. We don't yet have any female in our top management. And up until recently, we didn't have any female members on our board. So this is an area where we sat down and set some specific goals for where we wanted to be in the future. Moving on to the value drivers for us. First of all, we have the product performance. Of course, we're being in the market and having a goal of helping people with skin concerns. We need products that can actually do that. So the higher and better performing products, the more success we will see. So this is of course important for us. Sustainable products and packaging is a super important area for us. We are seeing demand from our customers in the market, and we're also seeing, as mentioned in the industry, there are some things that we need to be doing better. So this is also a value driver for us. Last thing is employee engagement. I will argue that any company in any market needs to be focusing on the employee engagement. Research also shows that higher engaged employees bring better performance. So this is an important area as well. To sum it all up, why is it important for you to be working with ESG in your startups? Well, it's good business. Studies show this. So in itself, this is a good place to get started. Also, investors are really transitioning towards ESG focused companies. How to get started? Start with your purpose. You'll find out that if you're working with your purpose and your vision statement and really finding a purpose that's higher than simply making profits, working with ESG will also be way easier for you. You'll see that many of the things that you're considering when trying to form your purpose is very well aligned with ESG. And then you need to be setting measurable KPIs and you need to be working actively with this. So to sum it up, this is the why, how, and what of ESG. Lastly, I just want to show you here where we really started to put a strong focus. We saw that this was an area, the environmental side, where we needed to improve and where there were some huge wins for us in order to do that. So we formed this vision, this strategy last year, and have detailed it into 7 very specific and measurable goals that we're working towards and that we need to achieve here in 2021. That was all for me. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that my story gave you a short introduction to how you can be working with ESG and expect to get out of it. And I'll be happy to answer any questions here afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story. That is really, really great and very inspiring as well. So I think we'll move on to our Q&A session, and we have 30 minutes for it. I see that you are starting to hand in some questions, so please also, if you sit back with any questions, please ask them in the Q&A, and I'll take as many as I can in the 30 minutes, and if we run out before, then we'll just stop before. But let's see how what we have here. So Anna is asking, this is a question regarding diversity on the board of directors. At pre-seed stage, the board is often unpaid and put together from the investor circle. However, there is also a lack of diversity in the investment ecosystem. So how would you suggest recruiting for diversity in the board from outside the investor circle? And I think, Alexander, maybe you should start on this one.
Yeah, for sure. It's a super good question, right? In general, how do you do it when there's underrepresentation in the normal groups that you would be looking for? I think I would set up goals of at least doing a couple of interviews with, let's say, was it especially female that you're focusing on, so from underrepresented groups, right? So at least have some goals within your team to reach out and have a chat or talk with at least a couple from underrepresented groups. How do you find them? I would do it the same way as we recommend all our startups to actually try to find board members and advisors, right? If you're an investor, we will actively help you if you invest, but also before, right? It's about figuring out the journey that you're embarking onto and what would be the key knowledge gaps that you have along that journey, right? What do you need? What kind of knowledge, bricks of knowledge do you miss in order to make it that a successful journey? And then figure out where would knowledge like this be sitting somewhere in the ecosystem, right? And then reaching out and hunting them like everybody else, right? It's about making contact, finding a good way in, maybe even a warm introduction, and then selling your story to them, right? And in that list, I would just maybe focus even more and maybe broaden the scope a bit to be a bit more inventive of where you could maybe find relevant profiles for your board or advisory board. I don't know, Chris, do you have any takes on this?
Yeah, like I think I would handle it like any other hiring process. Actually, like it's hard finding right members for your board is not that different than finding members for your team. They need to be how can I say aligned on the vision, where your company is going, on your values, etc. So I would handle it very much like that. And I think it's of course in the beginning it might be difficult to pay board members, but I think that you can. It is possible to find independent board members that are willing to if not work for free, but to do it at a rate or a plan that you figure out together. So it's definitely not impossible to do that. But overall, I would handle it very much like any other hiring process.
I think that's a very good point, Chris. And actually, we had a startup talk not long ago about hiring your first sales rep as a founder. And we were actually covering this topic exactly as how do you actually find these people. And Hakan, who was on this talk, was actually also sharing some thoughts and some tools on how to actually find these people. So if the immediate pool of applicants is not covering your diversity strategy, then where else can you go to actually meet meet these goals. So I would really suggest anybody who is more interested in this topic specifically to go ahead and watch that. It's called the Founder's Guide to the First Sales Hire, and it's available in our resources. We actually also did, and I know this is going to sound like a really irritating sales pitch, but we also did another startup talk on board of directors where they were also covering about this diversity talk, because it is interesting, and it is a challenge in the startup system or ecosystem to find the right candidates from a diversity perspective. So we've been trying to cover this a couple of times and give some more insights on that. I also see in the questions in the Q&A that there are a few more questions actually regarding those that issue about what do you do if you don't find the right person. So there's one here asking, everybody's talking about diversity in hiring, but what to do if you can't find the applicants from the right gender. So I don't know, do you want to elaborate a little bit more, or should we?
Yeah, well, then you don't hire. Like you need to be not compromising your company values, your sort of like whatever specifically you're hiring for in even if it's a board member or any other position. You shouldn't be hiring for gender. So if you don't find the right one, then you don't hire. So you keep looking. Like I think I would, that's what we're doing. If we don't find the right person with the right skill set, the gender it doesn't matter. So continue until you find the right person. I think that would be my advice.
Thank you. Anything, Alexander, or?
It's one of those impossible things, right? If they're not there, how do you find them, right? But that's also trying to build a startup is a bit of an impossible thing, right? It's succeeding where, the chances are slim. So give it a go and see how it goes.
Okay. All right. So I have a question here from Rubenstein, a question concerning a physical product. Chris, what if environmentally better raw materials make my product unprofitable compared to established competition that profits of higher volume versus volume of our startup?
Yeah, then obviously it's not going to be sustainable in the long run. Well, there are different ways of I can make it into a very broad answer, but I would say that if it's not viable for your business, well, then it's not the most sustainable option. Then you might be working on a transitioning plan, or you might start with a product category within your business and transitioning first, and hoping for the price of this raw material to go down. Or either you set a higher price and you, if the market is willing to pay for this price premium, I would say that you will need to be testing with these things. But of course, if there's strong competition and competition is very price driven, then it might not be the most viable option for you. Then you would need to work with suppliers in order to get the price down for this specific raw material.
Alexander, what do you think about, because usually in the startup world, we're like, just go for it, just do something, and then we'll fix things later, right? So what do you think in terms of this? Should you actually wait for the right supplier, or should you go ahead with somebody maybe for a limited time period? What is your thought on this?
Yeah. Again, in the early days, you're hacking your way through it, right? You're brute forcing everything. And I would lie if I said, wait out for you find the exact match, and that that they're doing good, well, all the way through their supply chain and the way they treat their employees and everything else, right? But at the early days, you do not have that kind of resources available to do the analysis fully understand what it entails and everything. So I would, start at a certain place, and then maybe, start as light as possible, do a questionnaire, and just ask the question, right? And see how they respond, and then take it from there. And then as you grow and your resources becomes even, larger, then you can double down a bit on the amount that you of work that you can put into it. But in the early days, right, you're brute forcing everything. So I would keep it light, and that's maybe the whole idea about the ESG napkin is just, for us, I don't think it's actually incredibly important to start at the right place and do everything completely right in the beginning. I think it's just actually about getting started, because as Chris also said, it's a whiteboard and you come up with some ideas and then you work on one of them, and then as soon as you kind of like dive into it a bit, then it unfolds, right? And you figure out, okay, what is actually the most important part for our business to focus on, and how do we actually focus on it? But if you didn't ask that question all the way in the beginning, you would never have unfolded it. And if you ask the question too late, then there'll be tons of structures set up already that you would need to change. And changing one supplier is easy. Changing 10 that all fail your ESG policy, right? That's difficult. So maybe, back to the point of starting small, but starting early. And Chris, maybe can you also, I would love to hear how much time did you actually spend on this in the beginning, and how much time is it taking up of you driving your business?
Yeah, so I have to say, like, we launched Neue in 1.5 years ago, and when we did that, we had some focus on finding sustainable materials, but we didn't go all in on it back then. I think that would have we wouldn't have been able to do that. Also, we had a short time to market, and we needed to bring this to market, but we started focusing on it. So I think I completely agree with you, Alexander, that you cannot work everything at once. You need to really start somewhere and then work your way up from there and improve. But actually during Corona lockdown last year, that's when I really had time to dive into this subject, looking into the industry, and I was actually quite surprised to see the issues that were at scale here. So that's where we started forming the environmental strategy, so to say, and also where we decided to anchor this in our management by giving me this Chief Footprint Officer title, but also really just to manifest it in our organization, saying that this is something on the long term that we need to be working on. And since then, it's been, I would say, at least 50% of my time is working specifically on ESG matters in one way or the other. So quite a lot of my time, I would say, but it doesn't have to be necessarily that much in other businesses. But I think for us, it's been the right amount, so to say, and we want to actually do more in the future as well.
Okay, so I'm just curious, how are your investors reacting to this, that you're actually focusing so much time on this subject? Is that right now maybe it's not profitable today, but maybe later? But what was the reaction when you actually said, hey, we're going to invest so much in this?
Yeah, the reaction was really good, I have to say, because it was also a common decision, not with all investors, obviously, but within the board, is to say, okay, is this something we need to double down on? And everyone around the table agreed that this is something that we need to be focusing on. Personally, what I've experienced is that some investors will need to be convinced with can we make money on this or not? So have your numbers ready, have them in order, and if you can convince them that it's also a good business, which in our case it's proven to be, then it's a win-win, and you just need to get started, right? But of course you need to be tying it together with making a business that is here for the long run, right? So if you cannot do that, in this question before with a raw material, like if it's not doable, simply not doable, that you wouldn't sell anything in the market because your price was too high, or that you couldn't sustain your company, then of course it's not the right thing to do. But you can have a vision that, okay, in the future I want to move towards this more sustainable raw material, for instance, right? So you can take the baby steps, and then the long-term vision is to implement it 100%. In our case, we have a long-term vision of becoming 100% circular in everything that we do. In practice, that is probably very unlikely, impossible, right? Because it would mean that all of our customers would need to recycle all of our products, and it's out of our hands basically. But it's a vision. It's something that we're striving towards, and a purpose that's higher than simply making profits, right? And I think that's important in itself.
Sure. Let's dwell a little bit more on this investor perspective, because there's also a few questions regarding, are we actually including ESG in the investment decisions? Ragnar is asking, are you including ESG in investment decisions here under, is it a requirement? Check the box, and or performance criteria. Please elaborate on your thoughts on the investment part.
That was me, I guess.
Yeah,
for sure. So definitely it's part of our investment decision, and it's definitely something that we look into. We both first, when we meet new companies at all, first time, it's an area, there is a blacklist of things we do not invest into. So we won't invest into weapons and drugs and everything else, right? So that's a negative list. But there's also actually a positive list, right? We believe that solving some of the huge challenges in the world now, so that would mainly be the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, right? If you're addressing one of these, they all speak to huge issues that the whole world is experiencing, right? So trying to aim to solve one of these is just aiming at a massive need. And if you are aiming at a massive need, then you probably also have the potential to become a very large company, which we also in the end would like to see, right? Then when moving down in our investment funnel, there will be increasingly a focus on both when we hear the pitch and everything, it's actually part of our decision-making process, the ESG factor, how much we put some weight behind this. And then in the due diligence, there's both a negative list where we actually again look into, are you being optimizing for tax, and you structure your companies for tax reasons and all these kind of things. So again, in the due diligence from us receiving investment from us, there's a negative side, but we do also actually focus on the positive side. So for each investment we do an ESG analysis and hypothesis, right? And that goes very much towards what are the main kind of like opportunities that we see for a given company to make a positive impact on the world, and how do we enable them to better do that, right? Because we also believe actually that it's good business. And then afterwards, when we close an investment and then take a board seat normally, then we'll be actively working with the company from now on. Now we launched the napkin from the basis of the napkin, right? So facilitating a board discussion, how could we actually anchor this in the company, and how could we work with it from the early days and then forward.
Great. Thanks. And I think also we actually published our checklist that we do in our due diligence process. Yeah. I will link to that also when I send out the recordings and the slides for today. I will include that also. So you can have a look on the inside, what's going on here. I think that's an interesting question. That's also related to this from Nagala. For fintech, how can ESG be important or be considered? So when you don't have a physical product, I think somebody else was also asking, if you aren't producing something physically, such maybe as a fintech company, how can ESG be important? How can you go around this topic? Maybe Alexander, you will start a little bit on this.
Yeah, for sure. So Chris also actually pointed out, of course, they have a footprint focus, which is large for a physical company like theirs. But there's a lot of other stuff that Neue is also working with that is, goes for every tech company, right? Or for every company in general, on diversity and everything else. And I also think that's what we try to bring forward with the napkin, is that even though you don't have a physical product and you maybe are a fintech, right? Then the governance set up about, how you're controlling other people's money, or making sure that that bribery and fraud is not being, and money laundering is not being, part of your use. So your product is only used for the intended use and not for all these unintended uses, right? So I think that for all tech companies, it's a super important point to dive into and to have some thoughts about.
Great. Thank you. Chris, maybe you could supply us with, of course you have a physical product, but there is also some ESG initiatives that you do that's not evolving around your physical product. Could you give us some examples of what you're doing at Neue?
Yeah, of course. And this is where, like, for us, of course, the environmental side is important for pure tech software companies, this is not where the biggest impact probably is. It would be on the social and governance side, definitely. I would say on the it's sort of like it's in between governance and social, but data privacy is just super important. It's something that we have been focusing on since our beginning. We're a spin-off company from Leo Pharma. So we back then when we were in the incubator there, we started having a strong focus on this because we're working with health data. So when you work with health data, there are some stronger regulations that you need to comply with. So for us, this is an area where we since the beginning has actually been worked with. And then when I started working with ESG, I was like, yeah, but we already have this in order. Okay, cool. It was sort of just like a confirmation that we were doing the right thing, because back when we were focusing on that and starting building our whole database structure, ESG was not on the top of our minds. But when we started working with ESG, I was like, yeah, okay, we actually have these things in order, but it's also a reminder saying that, okay, there are some things here we still need to be focusing on. We don't just need to put it, into practice. We also need to maintain these things, right? So that's one area where we have worked and where I believe every tech, fintech or software company needs to be focusing on. So that's a place to start.
Yeah, Alexander? I can't hear you.
Sorry. I had to call, so I'm muted, sorry, but yeah, I forgot to unmute. So just a point to be made here is actually there is different ESG frameworks being used out there, right? And S&P 500 is one of the big ones. Their ESG index, right? It covers a multiple of different factors. But the fun thing is to actually look at the distribution within the E, S, or G, right? And they actually put 52% behind the G factor. That means that more than half of what they actually, and that's for tech companies in particular, right? So that means that more than half that they score on is within the G factor. Then it's only 21% on the E and 27% on the S factor. So that also speaks towards if you're an early stage tech company, I would definitely also start, focusing on the early stages with the G factor, right? So that's setting up your company in a legal and proper way. It's about ensuring shareholder rights, right? It's about not being too inventive with the paying taxes and what we see out there. It's about these kind of things.
Great. And I also think actually the napkin itself, now we saw the napkin briefly, but I will send it out later as well. There are also a lot of examples of what you can actually do, very concrete hands-on tool on that. So hopefully that can also inspire you guys to see what can fit with your organization or your startup specifically. But Alexander, if I have a question here, if your team and company only can handle one or two things, what should they start with?
Yeah. It's super difficult to answer, right? As I, answer for everybody. It depends. No, I do actually think it depends on what area you're working in and your structure of your company and what you're trying to bring to the world, right? But I think what we just went over, that the G factor is actually for tech companies normally the most important factor. So I think I would actually start at just looking at how you set up your structure around your business, right? Then I also think that everybody should start with the societal ambition, right? So what are we here to create other than profit, right? Or massive growth or a big company or something, right? What kind of impact do we actually want to make on the world, right? And then try to tie that to your mission statement, right? So you're actually growing, while you're growing your company, you're also growing your impact in a positive way on the world, right? I think that those are also what I would like to invest in actually as an investor. That would be companies that can tie these two together, right? And going forward, I actually do think that there'll be a lot more capital available for these kind of companies because it's an increasing focus for investors in general, also for us. But so I actually think it will be a easier growth if you can combine. So societal ambition, I think everybody should start with, and then definitely have a look at the G factors around your company.
Do you think startups will have a better chance of getting funding if they have implemented these?
Yeah, there's actually been some studies. I didn't want to cite them today because they're a little, I don't know how well documented they are, but there's been some studies, right? But it's not a lot, and that's why I didn't bring them forward. There's been some studies that it's actually easier to raise your follow-on investment if you have a ESG. So the people that raise money and then can be able to raise money again. It's easier if you have a ESG focus as well. But me personally, I definitely know that I would rather invest in something that is putting a positive mark on the earth versus a negative or even zero mark. Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit back to how to get started. Chris, there's a question for you. Who or what kickstarted this process for you at Neue?
The environmental, like for us, it was the environmental side, definitely. But it's because we are the type of business we are, and we are putting something physical in this world. I think I've always had a passion for sustainability, or I have. And I really, it bothered me quite a lot looking into these numbers in the industry and seeing how much how much waste there is, and how little responsibility actually there is. So that's also why we have a very strong focus on bringing the industry together. It's not only us as a business or us as a brand that should be focusing on this. We want the whole industry to take actions here, and luckily the biggest ones in our industry also started to take action. So that's very good to see. And I think right now we look at it as having a strong focus, especially on environmental sustainability, is a competitive advantage right now. But looking 3 to 5 years ahead, it will be a license to operate. Basically, you need to have these things in order. So we're a little bit ahead of this, but in the future it's necessary. We need this in order to do our business. So for us, that's also you can say a validated point of why we started with it. But first and foremost, because we think we need to take responsibility.
Okay, I have a follow-up question from Jack Peters. What tool service is Neue using to offset carbon, and why did you choose this one?
We don't use a tool right now. I actually do it myself. We're working with an organization. I can be open about that. An organization in Denmark called Growing Trees. So we're helping forest projects here in Denmark, but has also been using something called Gold Standard, which is an organization where you can support forest projects as well that we have. We're in the process right now of calculating what you call the scope 3 emissions. You have scope 1, 2, and 3. So your scope 3 emissions is your whole value chain, like all the emissions in all of your value chain that you're emitting. And we haven't calculated that yet. And of course, we need to do that in order to offset our emissions. But there are more solutions popping up out there. I'm being contacted every week right now, basically, of different solutions of how to compensate. So there's multiple companies that are starting to really do this well, and I think in the future we will collaborate with one of them, but I don't know which one yet.
Okay, so is there any other ESG related tools that you can name drop for us today that could be very useful for us? Not necessarily just carbon tools, but in general. Do you have any that you work with that you could?
That's a good question. I guess I have, but when you put me here on the
okay, that was me.
I'm not sure. Like, I think in order to get started, this link I had with the SASB materiality assessment is a good place to start. We actually found that very useful in order to look into the e-commerce industry and personal care products. Where are the you could say the biggest sinners, so to say? Where should you really be putting your efforts? So this is a place where you could get started. A tool that we found very useful
All right. If you come up with more afterwards, then please send them to me. I will send them to everybody else. So a last question from Regedam. Setting ambitious KPI targets as you did in Neue with 100% CO2 neutral in 2021, and you realize it's too ambitious and would kill the baby in the process, how do you go back?
Okay, so if it
So setting ambitious KPI targets, as you did with Neue. If you realize it's too ambitious and it would kill your baby in the process, then how would you reverse it?
Yeah, okay, so let's say we weren't going to reach our goals, for instance. Is that like if
I think she means that if you're pursuing your targets here, but eventually it's hurting your business,
yeah,
what to do?
Well, it depends on if it hurts our profits. Well, I'm going to push through. Like, I think we have a responsibility to do this. Like, I formed this strategy because I believe, and we believe that it's the right thing to do. Of course, it needs to be. We need to be a sustainable business. So, like running profitably at some point. But it's a broad question. I would say if we're learning something doing the way, of course we there are things that might need to be changed. My ambition is to be open about it. So no matter what happens, we're going to be open about this. We're going to make public, like we did with our goals. They're actually public on our website. We're also going to report on it. So whatever change there might be, whatever we learn in the process, we'll be open about it, because I think other companies will learn from this. And that's what we want. We want others to learn from our mistakes, so to say. So there might be some goals that we cannot reach in 2021. That doesn't mean we will stop. Then we will continue in 2022. We also set ambitious goals because I believe that's what we need to do. We need to set the bar high, and we'll see how far we get. Yeah.
So I actually think that would be a really good follow-up question for you, Alexander. So this balance between how much you should focus on ESG and if it's impacting negatively on your core activities, then what do you think of that as an investor? Should they proceed for like a bigger purpose, or should they go back and focus on their core activities? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's might be something wrong with the question, right? Because is it just in the beginning that is hurting, right? Or are you building for long-term success, right? The grander vision. And I believe that if you are incorporating ESG factors in your long-term vision, that there's a higher likelihood that will be a successful vision and that you will be successful in reaching it, right? So I actually think, so it might hit you in the short run because you need to spend time on something more than you should if you just, put it aside and didn't spend time on it. But I actually think that it will increase the likelihood, and also the studies that I cited, right, it shows the same, that long-term success is higher if you actually work with these factors all the way from the beginning, right? So yeah, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Now, yeah, also if you have a vision or a company purpose that's clashing with ESG, then I think you need to work on your purpose and your company vision, because if you have something that works completely against it and you cannot find any purpose in the ESG matters, you might need to revisit your company purpose and your company vision.
And then don't start that next quick loan company, right? It doesn't do anything good.
All right, great. Thank you guys for doing this Q&A now. I will just briefly round up here because time is beginning to run out. So just we have this open door session on May 5th. So if you still have any questions or would like to work with us more on ESG or any other challenge that you have in your startup, then apply for this open door session. Then you can get 30 minutes with one of these three great, amazing people that know a lot about startups. So, so don't miss out on that opportunity. Our next startup talk will be in a whole different ballgame. We'll go over on the legal aspects of a startup and talk a little bit more about shareholders agreements. And we're going to do a very basic startup talk on it. So we'll introduce you to it and why it's important and what aspects are you should consider when you start a startup. So and that will be with my colleague and legal director Jonathan, and we'll also of course get a founder on stage and talk about their experiences with shareholders agreement. And that is May 19th, and I hope that you will sign up for this event as well. I will send out the link in the email that will come with also this recording and the slides from today. So without with all that said, thank you for joining us, Alexander and Chris, and I hope all of you guys have got something with you today, and hopefully inspired you to work more with ESG and making a positive impact on this world. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.